Hello, bonjour and welcome to your new Bonheur Private Wines video. After highlighting last week the importance of the acidity in wine and looking at where this acidity comes from, today we'll be digging into what it does at different levels in different wines, and not only to the taste of wine but also to its longevity, its age-worthiness, and we'll also have a word on how important acidity is to make our favorite vino go well with food. One of the great joys of life, wine and food pairing. Let's go. Last week we talked about how acidity is fundamental to the taste of wine. For a quick TLDR, if you've missed last week's video, wine is really one of the very few drinks and foods in general that is very acidic without being sweet at the same time, as most wines are dry indeed. Fruit juices and sodas are very acidic, but they're also very sweet, right? I think we talked about this a little in previous videos, but the taste of wine and of food in general is a matter of balance, meaning each component impacts your taste buds and your perception in a certain way. The sugars, the tannins, the oiliness, the alcohol, and the acidity. Famously, sugars or sweetness push against acidity very strongly. You can have a drink that's very acidic, but if it's also very sweet, it doesn't feel this acidic anymore. Think of a Coke, for example. It doesn't feel acidic even though it's very much so. That's because it's also extremely sweet. I think there's about 12 sugar cubes at least in a can of Coke, which sounds horrible, sounds like a whole lot, but in the end it doesn't taste all that sweet because it's also very acidic. Add this much sugar to anything, a coffee for example, it would just taste quite disgusting, frankly. Famously also, and we'll talk more about this in a moment, acidity balances fat or oily foods really well, like a squeeze of lemon on a piece of salmon or a steak does. But we'll get back to this in just a moment. In wine, what balances out the strong acidity, especially when there's no sugar in it in a dry wine, is the alcohol, which has a bit of sweetness or sweet taste to it, but also the texture of the wine, its oily texture, its oiliness from glycerol specifically, that specific molecule. The tannins complement it as well to form the whole wine's texture. When you taste a wine, what really drives the sensations is the acidity cutting through the palate, figuratively. Then around this acidic feel that drives the sensations are the texture, the oiliness, the sweetness or no sweetness, the tannins, the heat from the alcohol, etc. This is why I say that acidity is the backbone of the taste of wine, because it drives, it supports the sensations, and everything else follows around it, trying to actually contain this acidity. When the acidity is harmoniously matched by soft tannins, for example, a creamy texture, is when it is achieved balance. So this was what acidity does to the taste of wine. What's less known is that acidity also impacts the longevity of wine, how long a wine will be able to age for. As a general rule, or maybe a general indication, the more acidic, the better the wine might be able to age. Although this really needs to be clarified to be perfectly clear, because what matters most before the acidity is actually the wine's balance. And funnily enough, we've just talked about balance. Generally speaking, a balanced wine is a wine that will age really well and for a long time. So let's take counter examples so you understand this really well. Let's take one of these very acidic dry white wine, very crisp and bone dry whites, ones that would go really well with a seafood platter, for example, or with oysters, if you see what I mean, that style of wine. So those don't age really well. They quickly become really nutty in flavors. If you age them for too long, they will become flabby, a bit in texture, once the fruity, lemony character is gone, the wine will fall apart and decompose and taste off and probably harsh very quickly if you let them age for too long. If you take an affordable red that tastes quite harsh, that's really grippy and a little aggressive, and I'm saying affordable red here because that's more often than not what you get from cheap wines, this harshness, those won't age long either. The tannins are too reactive, so the tannins are going to combine with each other inside the bottle of wine. They'll sediment down the bottom of the bottle. All the structure and the balance of the wine will be gone, its soul, its substance, and will turn rather unpleasant really fast. Differently, but with the same result, a wine that wouldn't taste harsh to start with, but would taste really soft and cooked and mild and a little sweet and a little jammy, but a wine that wouldn't have enough acidity because it would be made from too ripe grapes, it could taste okay when young, but it won't age well because it will quickly taste like an old jar of strawberry jam because it wasn't balanced to start with, not enough acidity. Only wines that have a good acidity, a good oily texture to go with it, a good mild tannic structure if they're red, only those age harmoniously because they are balanced from the get-go from a young age. Your barrel-aged Chardonnay, for example, because it's acidic, but it's also creamy from the aging on lees in the barrels. Your complex, acidic, yet fruity and soft red wine that's been well crafted from low-yielding vines, those will age really well. If a wine is balanced, it is likely to age better. And that, my friend, is the secret. But then among balanced wines, and only amongst those, the more acidic wines will be, the better they'll age. And that's where I wanted to get to. That's why the good German Rieslings, for example, age so well, because they're balanced, but also very acidic. So among the balanced wines, the more acidic they are, the better they will age. That's also why wines from extreme altitude in Argentina, for example, are also likely to age really well. They are dense, but they're balanced, and then they have a lot of acidity from the altitude. They're more acidic than your average California red, for example. Something to think about. And I'll finish with a word on pairing wine and food, because why not? Let's have food with our wine also. The very fact that wine is acidic and the fact that it's generally dry is what makes it food friendly. I guess being French, I might be a little biased here, as in France we famously love having wine with our food. And I'm told it's not always the case in America. Many Americans prefer sweet drinks with their food. Well, let me give you at least my perspective for what it's worth. A dry beverage lets you taste the real flavor of your dishes. You take a bite of, say, a fine and subtle white fish dish, for example, or a good tomato and mozzarella salad with a dash of olive oil on top of it with fresh basil. If you taste that and then you take a big slurp of Coke or Dr. Pepper, how are you supposed to taste the delicate texture and the subtle sweetness of the fish at the next bite, or the balance of the sauce that comes with it, or how ripe and gorgeous the tomatoes may be? You can't taste that if you're having a very sweet drink. With a dry wine, however, you can taste your food and its different components without your senses being overwhelmed by the sugars. The acidic taste of wine, in fact, acts as a flavor enhancer, because acidity goes really well with fish, right? And that's why we use a squeeze of lemon on it often. Acidity goes well with a tomato and mozzarella salad too. That's why we add some balsamic vinegar over it. Wine does that too, just like lemon or vinegar. Wine goes along with the food, not against it. And it often enhances its flavors as well. It gives them another dimension, another angle, if you wish, some extra layers of flavors as well. And what makes it possible is the dominant acidic flavor that is the backbone of our wine, the acidity. Acidity is the food friendliness in wine as well. As a conclusion, acidity is balance, it's longevity, and it's food friendliness as well. What else do you want from it? It's a lot. Well, I do have an extra, a bonus thought to think about. Acidity is also a marker of the terroir, the local expression of a wine, the altitude, the cool climate, the expression of a grape. All of this is acidity as well. Acidity is also a big part of the diversity in wine, which is a big component of why us wine connoisseurs like enjoying our different glasses of different vinos, the diversity, the variety that we love to experience in wine. It all comes down, or a lot of it is acidity as well. On this final thought, I'll leave it here for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon in the wonderful world of wine. Santé, cheers.